Someone told me that there was an evil plot to make you do too much math, so I'm going to make it easier on you. This is 13.3 synthetic division, which is a whole lot easier than regular long division. So it's a simpler way to divide them. Instead of using all the x's, we're just going to use the coefficients and the constants. So we just deal with the raw numbers. One important thing you're going to see here is with the the dividing factor. In this case, the example I'm about to do, this x minus 6 is the dividing factor. The only time I'm ever going to use an opposite sign is right there. So as you'll see as I go to set it up down in the way that you set up synthetic division, instead of having a negative 6 right here in this little box, and yeah, you do want to put a little box there in the corner, I have a positive 6 because, again, that's the only time you use an opposite sign, is for that dividing factor right there. But then, as I said, we use coefficients and the constants. So as I set up the rest of my synthetic division here, these numbers that you're looking at, 1, -3, and -18, come from my quotient, the x squared minus 3x minus 18. Notice that we're just pulling out the coefficients. That's a 1x squared. That's a -3x, so again, just the -3's right there, and then the minus 18, I see that right there. So all those signs are the same. The only thing that's the opposite sign is the one from the dividing factor. Now down here describes the steps. The first thing you do is you drop down the first coefficient, which in our case here is the 1. I'm going to drop it down below the line. Okay. Now I'm going to multiply the corner number times this amount. So 6 times 1 is 6. I'm going to write the new amount under the next number. Well, the next number is -3 here, so I'm going to write 6 underneath that. Now I'm going to add these numbers up, and then I'm going to repeat this process. So -3 plus 6 is 3. And then repeat the process. 6 times 3 is 18. Write that under the next number. Add that up, and it's 0. Okay, well, we just finished synthetic division. Let's analyze a couple of our results now. Because we're just dealing with raw numbers. We need to understand what it all means. First of all, the very last number you get represents the remainder. And it actually represents the amount that you get when you plug in this number into the original polynomial there. So if I plugged 6 into this original amount, I would get 0. But that's also kind of the same thing as if I divide by x minus 6, I would get a remainder of 0. So it's kind of cool that it has two uses there. So since I have no remainder, that does mean that x minus 6 is a divisor. And that means that these numbers down here somehow represent what I get when I finish division. And the way we look at that is, so if this is the remainder, then reading from right to left, then the 3 is the constant. So my answer is going to be a plus 3 here at the end. And then the next thing would be the linear term. So the linear term would have a coefficient of 1, so it would just be plus 1x, or just x. So in other words, whenever I divide x minus 6 into that polynomial, it does leave me with x plus 3. And again, the x plus 3 is coming straight from this. I'm just taking these as the constant, basically the exact opposite of how I got the 1, -3, and -18 from the original. I'm just kind of going backwards. You just have to kind of read it from right to left, though, because the first number is going to represent your constant, and then it's going to go higher from there. All right, and so let's see some more examples of all that. So I'm going to set this up in synthetic division. First of all, I'm going to take, in my divisor, it's x minus 3, so then in the corner box I'm going to put a positive 3. And then I'm going to put in all of my coefficients, which are going to be 1 for the x cubed, -4 for the x squared, 5 for the x, and then just 1 there for the constant. And now we do the process. Bring down the first number. 3 times 1 is 3. Add that together. -4 plus 3 is -1, and repeat. Multiply 3 times -1. Combine that. 5 times plus -3, or just 5 minus 3 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. And 1 plus 6 is 7. Now here's the thing. The 7 is the remainder. So that means that this does not divide perfectly. And if I want to write all this out as a polynomial, then the 7 is the remainder, okay? Now remember, remainders go on top of the divisors, so 7 would go over x minus 3. And then the 2 is the constant, and then I'd have minus 1x, don't forget the plus sign here for the 2, and then that means that this positive 1 right here represents the x squared term. Alright, next example. So again, we're going to set it all up. This one's a little bit longer. X minus 6 is my divisor, so that means I'm going to put a 6 in the corner box. And my coefficients will be a 1, a negative 3, a negative 28, a positive 59, and a positive 6. Big old line underneath that, drop down the 1. 6 times 1 is 6. Combine that is 3. 6 times 3 is 18. Combine that would be negative 10. 6 times negative 10 is negative 60. Combine that is negative 1. Then 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. Combine that is 0. 0 at the very end means I have no remainder. So then going from right to left here, this negative 1 is the constant. The negative 10 is the linear term, so that's negative 10x. The 3 is the x squared term, 3x squared. It's positive. And then that means that this 1 represents the x cubed term. And that's the answer. Okay, last example. Now in this one we're going to have one or two little goofy things here. First of all, I want you to notice that while it starts as x to the 4th, notice that there is no x cubed, so we'll talk about what to do there. And we'll just kind of go from that. So here, this is x plus 4 is my divisor, so again, opposite sign of that would be a negative 4 in my corner box. And then I'm going to start with a 2 is the coefficient for the x to the 4th. Since there is 0 x cubes, I'm going to put a 0 there. You do have to do that. You have to put a 0 whenever there's a missing term like that. And then the negative 30 for the x squared, the 9 for the x, and the 4. So do pay attention to things like missing terms because you have to put a 0 for it. Alright, bring down the 2. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. 0 plus negative 8 is negative 8. Negative 4 times negative 8 is positive 32. Combine that is positive 2. Negative 4 times 8, or sorry, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Combine that is 1. 4 times 1, negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Combine that is 0. And so again, the ending in a 0 means my remainder is 0. So then my constant term is 1. Then my linear term is an x. Then this negative 8 would be negative 8x squared. And the 2 would represent 2x cubed. Alright. Ask questions in class if you don't get anything.